For 300 years, humanity had been the galaxy's favorite punching bag. We were the newcomers, the primitives, the species that barely crawled out of their gravity well before stumbling into a universe already carved up by ancient civilizations. The Galactic Council treated us like children, useful children who could mine asteroids and fight their wars, but children nonetheless. They gave us scraps, outdated technology, restricted trade routes. When human colonies begged for medical supplies during the Kepler Plague, the Council debated for 6 months while 2 million died. When pirates raided our outer settlements, Council peacekeepers were always delayed or reassigned. We were expected to be grateful for their protection, even as they systematically dismantled every attempt at human independence. But here's what those ancient, supposedly wise species never bothered to learn about humanity. We have a breaking point, and when we reach it, we don't just push back. We innovate, we adapt, and we remember every single slight. The Andromedans thought they understood warfare. They'd conquered 17 systems with their plasma cannons. The Zephyrians believed their psychic networks made them unbeatable in battle. The crystalline Vorthan Empire had never lost a conflict in 8,000 years. None of them had ever fought humans who had nothing left to lose. This is the story of how humanity went from the galaxy's servants to its most feared force in 18 months. It's the story of what happens when you push a species that survived ice ages, world wars, and the vacuum of space by never ever giving up. The Galactic Council thought they could control us forever. They were catastrophically wrong. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the smoldering remains of New Geneva drift through space like scattered embers. The human colony that had housed 4 million souls just 48 hours ago was now nothing but debris and memories. The acrid smell of smoke and burned electronics filled the ship's recycled air, carried by the handful of survivors they had managed to rescue. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council station," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from the communications console, his voice carefully neutral despite the rage burning in his eyes. Chen turned away from the viewport, her weathered face a mask of controlled fury. At 62, she had served in the Earth Defense Force for over 4 decades, climbing through the ranks while watching humanity grovel before alien powers that treated them like useful pets. The silver stars on her collar felt heavier today, weighted down by the responsibility of representing a species that had been pushed beyond endurance. "Put it through," she said, straightening her uniform. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Counselor Thexvar, the Andromedian representative who oversaw human affairs. His elongated skull gleamed under the artificial lights of the council chamber, and his 4 arms gestured dismissively as he spoke. Behind him, Chen could see other council members, the crystalline Vorthans, the psychic Zephyrians, and a dozen other species that had carved up the galaxy centuries before humans had even invented the wheel. Admiral Chen. Thexvar's voice resonated with the casual arrogance that had become so familiar to human ears over the past 3 centuries. "I trust you are managing the evacuation efficiently. The Council has reviewed the incident at New Geneva and determined that the colony was operating outside approved parameters." Chen's jaw tightened. Outside approved parameters? They were growing food, Counselor. Feeding their families. They were utilizing unauthorized agricultural techniques, another voice interjected. This came from Counselor Zix, a Zephyrian whose blue-tinged skin seemed to shimmer as her psychic abilities enhanced her natural communication. The bioenhancement methods being employed could have contaminated the entire sector's ecosystem. "So you sent the Khazari enforcement fleet to sterilize the entire planet?" Chen's voice rose slightly, though she fought to maintain military decorum. 4 million human beings? Dead because they were growing crops too efficiently? Thexvar's expression didn't change. In his species, emotion was considered a sign of mental deficiency. "The preservation of galactic stability requires difficult decisions, Admiral. The Council regrets the loss of life, but the colonists were warned multiple times to cease their unauthorized activities. Chen felt her hands clench behind her back. The warnings Thexvar referenced had been buried in subsection 47 of a trade regulation document that was 8,000 pages long and written in bureaucratic language that would have challenged even Earth's most experienced lawyers. The colonists had been growing hybrid crops that could survive in New Geneva's harsh climate, a breakthrough that could have fed millions throughout human space. But the technique used genetic markers that the Council considered potentially destabilizing to approved agricultural protocols. "And what about the children?" Chen asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "The schools, the hospitals, the nurseries we found floating in the wreckage? Regrettable casualties in the enforcement of galactic law," Thexvar replied without missing a beat. "However, I did not contact you to debate policy, Admiral. The Council has new assignments for the human fleet." Chen's blood ran cold. Even now, in the aftermath of genocide disguised as law enforcement, they wanted to use human ships and human lives to further their agenda. What assignments? The hegemony has been expanding their territory near the spiral arm's edge, Counselor Zix explained, her mental voice echoing inside Chen's skull with uncomfortable intimacy. The Council requires a rapid response, and human vessels are coming, expendable in such operations. There it was, the word that had defined humanity's relationship with the galaxy for 3 centuries. Expendable, useful enough to die for alien interests, not valuable enough to protect when they needed help. "The hegemony has battle cruisers and planet killers," Chen said slowly. "You're asking us to commit suicide. You are being asked to serve," Thexvar corrected. "As humanity has always served the greater galactic community, the Council has already approved the deployment. Admiral Reyes will lead the operation with 70% of the human fleet. Chen's oldest friend, a man who had saved her life during the Titan Rebellion and had stood beside her through countless battles. Now he was being sent to die because the Council needed someone expendable to throw at an enemy they didn't want to face themselves." "When?" Chen asked. "The fleet departs in 6 hours," Thexvar replied. "However, that is not why I contacted you, Admiral. The Council has decided that humanity's recent instabilities require closer supervision. Effective immediately, all human vessels will carry Galactic Council observers to ensure compliance with regulations." Chen felt something crack inside her chest, a sound like breaking ice that only she could hear. For 300 years, humanity had bent the knee. They had accepted second-class citizenship in exchange for protection that never came when they needed it most. They had watched their colonies burned, their people enslaved, their innovations stolen or suppressed, all while being told it was for the greater good. But this was different. This was the final insult wrapped in the language of law and order. Not only would human ships be sent to die in pointless battles, but alien observers would be there to make sure they died efficiently and without complaint. "I see," Chen said, her voice steady despite the hurricane of rage building inside her. "And if we refuse?" Thexvar's forearms spread in a gesture that might have been meant as conciliatory but came across as condescending. "Admiral, surely you understand? That is not an option. The Council's decision is final. Humanity exists within the galactic community by the grace of more advanced species. That grace can be withdrawn. The threat was clear: submit completely, or face the same fate as New Geneva on a species-wide scale." Chen looked around the bridge of the Defiance, seeing her reflection in the eyes of her crew. These were good people, men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, even as their own leaders sold them out piece by piece. They deserve better than to be treated as disposable tools in someone else's war. "I understand perfectly, Counselor," Chen said finally. "Humanity will respond to the Council's generous offer." "Excellent," Thexvar replied, apparently missing the dangerous edge in her voice. "The observers will arrive within the hour. See that they are accommodated appropriately. The transmission cut off. leaving the bridge in tense silence. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Outside the viewport, the debris field that had once been New Geneva continued its slow dance through the void. 4 million lives reduced to scattered atoms and memories. "Ma'am?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked quietly. "Your orders?" Chen turned to face her crew, and something in her expression made them straighten unconsciously. In her eyes, they could see the end of an era. The end of humanity's long, humiliating submission to alien rule. "Send a coded message to all human vessels," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated grievances. "Use the old resistance frequencies. Tell them that Admiral Chen sends her regards, and that it's time for humanity to remember what we do best." Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Survival, Lieutenant. And revenge." She walked to her command chair and settled into it, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. In 6 hours, Miguel Reyes would lead the human fleet into a battle they couldn't win. Galactic Council observers would be stationed on every human ship to ensure compliance and obedience. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, the Kasari Enforcement Fleet was probably already selecting the next human colony to sterilize. But something had changed in the aftermath of New Geneva. Chen could feel it spreading through the human fleet like wildfire, a whisper of defiance that had been building for generations. The aliens had finally pushed too far, demanded too much, taken too many lives in the name of galactic stability. They had forgotten that humanity had not climbed to the top of their own world's food chain by accepting defeat gracefully. They had forgotten that humans were survivors, innovators, and when backed into a corner, absolutely ruthless in their determination to live. The Galactic Council thought they controlled humanity. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. Chen activated her personal communication system and began composing a message that would be transmitted to every human colony, every research station, every mining operation scattered across the galaxy. It was time to remind the universe what happened when you pushed a species with nothing left to lose. The message was simple: to all human personnel, Operation Exodus begins now. Implement Protocol 7. No prisoners, no mercy, no more kneeling. As she sent the message, Chen felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens had spent 3 centuries teaching humanity how to fight their wars, mine their asteroids, and navigate their politics. They had given humans access to advanced technology, military training, and most importantly, detailed knowledge of every weakness in their supposedly perfect galactic civilization. They had, without realizing it, been training their own executioners. The war for human independence was about to begin, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Because when humans finally stopped playing by other people's rules, they became something that made even the void itself tremble. The Galactic Council had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. Elena Vasquez had always been good at seeing patterns where others saw chaos. It was what made her one of the finest xenobiologists in human space, and what had gotten her assigned to the supposedly prestigious position of Chief Science Officer aboard the research vessel Prometheus. What she hadn't expected was that her greatest discovery would come not from studying alien life forms, but from watching her own species finally stop pretending to be something they weren't. The transformation had begun within hours of Admiral Chen's transmission. Elena watched from the observation lab as teams of human engineers swarmed over the Prometheus, implementing modifications that should have been impossible with their limited resources. But humans, she was learning, had always been excellent at making the impossible merely difficult. "Doctor, you need to see this," called Marcus Webb, her assistant, his voice tight with excitement and barely contained terror. Elena pushed away from her workstation and joined him at the tactical display, where streams of data were flowing in from human vessels across 3 sectors. "My God," she whispered. The display showed the positions of over 2,000 human ships, military vessels, cargo haulers, research stations, mining platforms, even converted passenger liners. For 3 centuries, they had been scattered across the galaxy like seeds in the wind, going wherever the Galactic Council's needs demanded. Now, for the first time in human history, they were moving with singular purpose. But it wasn't their coordination that took Elena's breath away. It was what they were doing as they moved. "The cargo ships aren't running to safe harbor," Marcus said, his fingers dancing over the holographic controls to highlight specific vessel movements. "They're converging on strategic council supply routes. And look at this. Every mining platform in the Kepler system just went dark simultaneously." Elena studied the data, her scientific mind automatically cataloging the implications. The humans weren't just rebelling. They were implementing a strategy that showed intimate knowledge of galactic infrastructure and supply chains. 300 years of forced labor and second-class citizenship had given them access to every critical system in council space. "Dr. Vasquez, report to the bridge," came the voice of Captain Foster over the ship's intercom. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances before hurrying through the corridors of the Prometheus, passing teams of technicians who were installing equipment that definitely wasn't in the original ship specifications. The bridge was a hive of controlled chaos. Captain Elizabeth Foster, a woman who had spent 15 years navigating the treacherous waters of Galactic Council politics, stood at the center of it all with the calm confidence of someone who had finally stopped pretending to be something she wasn't. "Elena, I need your expertise," Foster said without preamble. "How long would it take for the Council to replace their biological research facilities if they were suddenly unavailable?" Elena felt her scientific ethics warring with 3 centuries of accumulated grievances. "Captain, if you're asking what I think you're asking, I'm asking how we win a war against opponents who have superior numbers, better technology, and home field advantage across most of the galaxy," Foster interrupted. "Because conventional warfare won't cut it. The Council has had 8,000 years to perfect their military doctrine, but they've never fought humans who weren't playing by their rules." On the main display, Elena could see tactical information streaming in from across human space. What she saw made her stomach clench with a mixture of horror and admiration. Human vessels weren't engaging Council forces directly. Instead, they were targeting infrastructure with surgical precision. A mining operation in the Vega system that supplied rare minerals to Andromedan weapons manufacturers had simply vanished, along with its entire output for the last 6 months. 3 major shipping routes that carried foodstuffs to Zephyrian worlds had been quietly disrupted, with cargo ships disappearing into the void without a trace. Research stations studying diseases that affected multiple alien species had gone silent, taking with them decades of accumulated medical knowledge. "This isn't warfare," Elena said slowly. "This is systematic dismantling." "Exactly," Foster replied. "The Council thinks they understand human nature because they've seen us fight their wars. But they've never seen us fight our war. And when humans fight for survival, we don't just adapt to the environment, we remake it entirely." As if to emphasize her point, the communications console lit up with an incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. The woman who had become the unofficial leader of human resistance appeared on the main screen, and Elena was struck by how different she looked. Gone was the careful deference that had marked her interactions with Council officials. In its place was something that reminded Elena of the predators she had studied on Earth. Focused, patient, and absolutely deadly. "All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. With a status update," Chen began. "Phase 1 implementation is proceeding ahead of schedule. The Council's supply chains are experiencing what they will classify as minor disruptions for approximately 72 hours. This gives us a narrow window to complete Phase 2 preparations." Elena found herself leaning forward despite her apprehensions. "Phase 2? Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "For 3 centuries, we've been the galaxy's maintenance crew. We've repaired their ships, serviced their stations, managed their supply routes, and maintained their infrastructure, which means we know exactly where all the critical points are." The display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of Council space, with human positions marked in blue and critical infrastructure highlighted in red. Elena's scientific mind immediately grasped the implications. and they terrified her. Every jump gate relay in the outer rim is maintained by human technicians, Chen continued. Every life support system on their deep space stations was installed by human engineers. Every communication array that keeps their empire connected relies on components that we manufactured, shipped, and serviced. Elena watched as the red dots on the map began to flicker and change color, each one representing a critical system that was suddenly no longer under council. "My God," Marcus whispered beside her. "We built their empire. We've been maintaining it for 3 centuries. And now we're taking it apart," Foster said with grim satisfaction. "Piece by piece, system by system, until they understand that their power was always an illusion built on human labor." The tactical display updated again, showing new information from across the galaxy. Council worlds were beginning to experience what their media was describing as technical difficulties, power grids fluctuating, communication networks experiencing random outages, transport systems developing mysterious glitches that left thousands stranded. But Elena could see the pattern. Nothing was random about these failures. They were precisely targeted to maximize disruption while minimizing casualties, creating chaos without mass death. It was a strategy that could only have been conceived by a species that had learned to survive by understanding systems better than those who built them. "Admiral!" came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from Council space. They're requesting immediate technical assistance from all available human personnel." Chen's laugh was like winter wind. "I'm sure they are. Tell them our technicians are experiencing labor disputes and will return to work once certain policy adjustments have been made." Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a rebellion, but a complete inversion of power dynamics. For the first time in 8,000 years, the advanced civilizations that ruled the galaxy were dependent on a species they considered primitive. "Dr. Vasquez," Chen's voice drew her attention back to the screen. "I understand you have expertise in xenobiology and ecosystem management?" "Yes, Admiral," Elena replied, though she suspected she didn't want to know where this was leading. "Excellent. I'm transmitting coordinates for a research facility in the Centauri system. We've received intelligence that the Council is developing biological weapons specifically designed to target human genetic markers. I need you to evaluate the threat and determine appropriate countermeasures." Elena felt her blood run cold. Biological weapons designed to target human genetics meant genocide on a species-wide scale. The Council wasn't just planning to punish human rebellion. They were planning to eliminate humanity entirely. "One more thing," Chen added. "The facility is heavily guarded, and they'll be expecting a frontal assault. So we're not giving them one. You'll be going in with a team of what the Council would consider civilian contractors performing routine maintenance. Amazing what people will ignore when it's just humans doing manual labor." The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at tactical data that showed the scope of human operations across the galaxy. What she was seeing defied everything she thought she knew about her own species. In less than 48 hours, humans had gone from scattered, oppressed subjects to coordinating the most sophisticated resistance operation in galactic history. "How is this possible?" Marcus asked, echoing her thoughts. "We're talking about perfect coordination across thousands of light years without any central command structure." Foster turned to them, and Elena saw something in the captain's eyes that made her understand exactly how this was possible. "Because we've been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries, even if we didn't know it. Every human who ever bit their tongue while aliens called them primitive. Every family that watched their loved ones die while Council bureaucrats debated whether to send aid. Every engineer who was forced to build weapons that would be used to oppress their own people." She gestured toward the viewport, where human ships could be seen maneuvering with precision that would have impressed even Council tacticians. "We didn't start this war, Elena. We've been fighting it for 300 years, one small act of defiance at a time. One sabotaged component, one delayed shipment, one accidentally corrupted database. The Council thought they were seeing incompetence and primitive technology. What they were actually seeing was a species preparing to tear their empire apart from the inside. Elena looked at the data streaming across the displays and realized that Foster was right. This wasn't a spontaneous rebellion. It was the culmination of centuries of planning, carried out by millions of humans who had pretended to be loyal while quietly positioning themselves to destroy everything their oppressors had built. The Galactic Council had spent 3 centuries teaching humans how their empire worked, never realizing that humans learn differently than other species. They didn't just memorize procedures, they understood systems. They didn't just follow orders, they analyzed weaknesses. They didn't just accept their place in the hierarchy, they figured out how to tear the whole structure down. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Defense Command." "Put it through," Foster ordered. The face that appeared on screen was weathered and grim. General Harrison, the highest-ranking human military officer outside of Admiral Chen. His expression left no doubt about the seriousness of what he was about to say. "All human vessels, be advised that the Council has just issued what they're calling Emergency Directive 7. Effective immediately, any human vessel that fails to report to the nearest Council station for safety inspections will be classified as hostile and destroyed on site." The Council was done pretending this was about law and order. They were moving to open warfare. But General Harrison wasn't finished. However, intelligence sources indicate that Council forces are experiencing significant operational difficulties. Apparently, their weapons systems are suffering from what their technicians are calling cascading maintenance failures. Estimated time to restore full combat capability is 90 to 6 hours. Elena stared at the screen as understanding dawned. 96 hours. Just long enough for human forces to complete whatever Phase 3 of their operation entailed. The Council had built their empire on the backs of human labor, never imagining that those same humans were quietly ensuring that when the time came, every weapon, every ship, every critical system would fail exactly when they needed it most. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster announced to the bridge crew, "we are witnessing the end of the Galactic Council as a meaningful force in this galaxy, and it's happening because they made one critical mistake." "Which was?" Elena asked. Foster's smile was predatory. "They forgot that humans don't just survive. We evolve. And we've spent 3 centuries evolving into the perfect enemy for an empire built on technological superiority and bureaucratic control." Elena realized she was no longer just witnessing history. She was helping to write it. And for the first time in her life, she was genuinely proud to be human. Commander Jake Morrison had spent 12 years fighting wars for species that considered him expendable. He had led assault teams against hegemony strongholds, conducted reconnaissance missions in hostile systems, and watched good people die for causes that meant nothing to the aliens giving the orders. But nothing in his military experience had prepared him for what he was witnessing now. The bridge of the UES Retribution hummed with an energy he had never felt before. The focused intensity of humans who were finally fighting for themselves. Around him, officers who had spent their careers following alien protocols were improvising tactics that would have made their former council liaisons break out in terror sweats. "Janji, Commander, we have visual confirmation on the Andromedan Task Force," Lieutenant Sarah Kim reported from the tactical station. 12 heavy cruisers, 43 destroyers, and what looks like a planetary bombardment platform. They're moving in standard council formation. Morrison studied the tactical display, where the enemy fleet appeared as red dots advancing in the precise geometric patterns that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. Beautiful, efficient, and completely predictable to anyone who had been forced to study Council military doctrine for 3 centuries. Distance to target? 400,000 kilometers in closing, Kim replied. "They're hailing us on standard diplomatic frequencies." Morrison almost laughed. Even now, facing open rebellion, the Council forces were following their protocols. It was exactly the kind of inflexibility that humans had learned to exploit. "Put them through," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Kethmore, an Andromedian officer whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the galaxy. His elongated skull gleamed under the harsh lights of his command bridge, and his forearms moved in gestures that conveyed supreme confidence. "Human vessels!" Kethmore's voice resonated with the casual authority of someone who had never faced meaningful opposition. "You are in violation of Galactic Council Emergency Directive 7. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for safety inspections." Morrison looked around his bridge, seeing the faces of men and women who had spent their entire careers being talked down to by creatures like Kethmore. But something was different now. Where once there might have been resignation or barely suppressed rage, he saw only cold calculation. "Admiral Kethmore," Morrison replied, his voice carrying none of the deference that Andromedians expected from humans. "This is Commander Morrison of the United Earth Navy. I'm afraid we're going to have to decline your generous offer." The alien's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his perfect confidence. "Commander, surely you understand the futility of resistance. My task force represents the finest military technology in the galaxy. Your primitive vessels can't possibly... What?" Morrison interrupted, something that no human had ever done to a ranking council officer before. "Can't possibly have learned anything in 3 centuries of maintaining your superior technology? Can't possibly understand your tactical doctrine after being forced to study it since childhood? Your bravado is admirable, human, but ultimately pointless. My ships mount plasma cannons capable of vaporizing your entire fleet. My shields can withstand any weapon in your arsenal. This ends one way." Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You're absolutely right, Admiral. This does end one way. Sarah, show our guest what humans have been working on while they thought we were too stupid to innovate." The tactical display shifted, showing a detailed schematic of the Andromedian heavy cruiser design. But this wasn't just any schematic. It was annotated with 3 centuries of human maintenance reports, system upgrades, and routine modifications that had been implemented by human engineers. "You see, Admiral," Morrison continued, "humans have been inside your ships for 300 years. We've repaired your engines, calibrated your weapons, maintained your life support systems. We know every circuit, every relay, every single point of failure in your superior technology." As if to demonstrate his point, one of the Andromedian destroyers suddenly broke formation, its engine output fluctuating wildly as internal systems began failing in cascade. Kethmore's confident expression cracked entirely. "What have you done?" "We haven't done anything," Morrison replied. "Your own maintenance protocols did it. You see, every time a human technician worked on your ships, they followed procedures exactly. Except for tiny, insignificant modifications that were so small your quality control systems never noticed them. Modifications that would lie dormant until activated by a specific signal." Another Andromedian vessel shuddered as its weapon systems powered down unexpectedly. Then another. Within moments, half of Kethmore's task force was experiencing what their computers would register as random system failures. "It's impossible," Kethmore said, his voice rising. "Our security protocols were designed by species that think in terms of grand gestures and overwhelming force," Morrison interrupted. "But humans think small. We think about the one bolt that holds a critical system together, the one line of code that can crash an entire network, the one component that, when it fails, takes everything else with it." The tactical display updated again, showing the human fleet breaking apart into dozens of smaller formations. Instead of the massive capital ships that dominated Council warfare, Morrison's forces consisted mainly of converted cargo haulers, modified mining vessels, and ships that the Council would have classified as non-military assets. But Elena Vasquez had been right about one thing. When humans fought for survival, they didn't just adapt to their environment. They remade it entirely. Weapons-free. Morrison-free. Morrison ordered. Target their disabled vessels first. Let's show them what 3 centuries of human ingenuity looks like when it's not being wasted on their bureaucracy. The UES Retribution's main guns opened fire, but they weren't the plasma cannons or particle beams that Council forces expected. Instead, streams of what looked like metallic debris began impacting Andromedian shields. "Kinetic penetrators?" Kethmore's voice was incredulous. "You're using primitive projectile weapons?" "Not exactly," Morrison replied. "We're using smart projectiles that were manufactured in your own fabrication plants using materials requisitioned through your own supply chains. Each one is designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in Andromedian shield technology, vulnerabilities that we discovered while performing routine maintenance on your defensive systems." The streams of projectiles began punching through Andromedan shields as if they weren't there, tearing into hull plating with devastating efficiency. But the real surprise came when the projectiles reached their targets and began deploying their secondary payloads. Instead of explosives, each penetrator carried a swarm of microscopic machines, nanoscale engineers that immediately began disassembling Andromedan ships from the inside. Within minutes, vessels that had taken decades to construct were being reduced to their component atoms by technology that the Council had never seen before. Nanotechnology? Kethmore's voice was barely a whisper now. That's forbidden under the Galactic Warfare Accords. The Galactic Warfare Accords applied to civilized species, Morrison said, his tone conversational despite the destruction unfolding around them. But you've spent 3 centuries telling us we're primitives. So we decided to fight like primitives. No rules, no restrictions, no concern for what the galaxy considers civilized warfare. As the last of Kethmore's disabled ships succumbed to nanoscale deconstruction, the human fleet began moving again, but instead of pressing their advantage, they scattered into space, disappearing into jump points that would take them deep into Council territory. "Where are you going?" Kethmore demanded. "This battle isn't over." Morrison's smile widened. "Admiral, this was never a battle. This was a demonstration. We wanted the Council to understand that the rules of engagement have changed. You can't fight an enemy that rebuilt your entire military infrastructure from the ground up." He gestured toward the tactical display, which now showed human forces appearing throughout Council space. Not as invading fleets, but as small, distributed units that were emerging from inside the Empire's own supply chains. Every cargo ship, every maintenance vessel, every civilian contractor that you've been ignoring for 3 centuries, they're all part of our military now. And they're already inside your most secure facilities, working on your most critical systems, with complete access to everything you've tried to keep hidden from us. The realization hit Kethmore like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been planning a conventional war. They had been positioning themselves for something far more devastating, the complete subversion of Council power from within. "You're talking about the systematic destruction of galactic civilization," the Andromedian said. "No," Morrison corrected. "We're talking about the systematic replacement of galactic civilization with one that doesn't require the systematic oppression of entire species." He turned to his communications officer. "Send the prearranged signal to all human assets. Phase 3 is authorized." Across the galaxy, thousands of human maintenance workers suddenly stopped pretending to be harmless. On Council worlds, critical infrastructure began failing in patterns too complex to be coincidental. In Council space, military bases found their own security systems turning against them. Throughout the Empire, the vast network of human labor that had kept the galaxy functioning for 3 centuries revealed itself as the most sophisticated intelligence and sabotage network in galactic history. "This is madness," Kethmore whispered. "The chaos you're unleashing will destroy everything." "Maybe," Morrison acknowledged, But that's the difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. When everything we've built gets destroyed, we don't mourn. We innovate. We've been doing it for millions of years on a planet that tried to kill us in every way imaginable. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, plagues. Earth threw everything it had at us, and we not only survived but thrived. He stood up from his command chair, and something in his posture made it clear that he was no longer just a military commander. He was speaking as a representative of his entire species. The Council made a mistake when they decided to treat us as expendable, because expendable things don't have anything to lose, and when humans have nothing to lose, we become something that makes even the void itself nervous. The tactical display updated one final time, showing the true scope of human operations. It wasn't just military action, it was complete societal transformation. Human colonies were declaring independence. Human workers were seizing control of critical facilities. Human scientists were revealing technologies that had been hidden for decades. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Galactic Council's perfect order was unraveling, and it was happening because they had underestimated a species that had learned to see opportunity in every disaster. "Tell me, Admiral," Morrison said to Kethmore, "in all your military training, did anyone ever teach you how to fight an enemy that evolves faster than you can adapt?" "Well, I didn't think so," Morrison said. "That's going to be a problem for you. Because evolution is what humans do best, and we've had 3 centuries to evolve into the perfect enemy for an empire built on stagnation and control." He nodded to his communications officer, who cut the transmission, leaving Kethmore alone with the wreckage of his task force and the dawning realization that everything he thought he knew about warfare had just become obsolete. Morrison looked around his bridge, seeing in his crew's faces the same transformation he felt in himself. They were no longer soldiers fighting someone else's war. They were the vanguard of a species that had finally stopped pretending to be anything other than what they really were: survivors, innovators, and when necessary, absolutely ruthless in their determination to forge their own destiny. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. And Morrison suspected that when the lesson was over, there wouldn't be much left of the old order to remember what things had been like before humans decided to stop kneeling. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council had never been designed for war councils. Its soaring crystalline spires and floating meditation platforms were meant to inspire peaceful contemplation and reasoned debate. Today, however, the ancient chamber echoed with something it had not heard in 8 millennia: the sound of panic among species that had never known genuine fear. Counselor Thexvar stood before the assembled representatives of 300 civilizations, his forearms trembling with rage, and something he refused to acknowledge as terror. Behind him, holographic displays showed the systematic collapse of galactic infrastructure on a scale that defied comprehension. "In 72 hours, he announced to the chamber, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority even as his world crumbled around him. "The human uprising has destroyed 8 centuries of careful development. Supply chains that took millennia to establish have been severed. Defense networks that protected 1,000 worlds have gone silent. The very foundations of our civilization are being torn apart by primitives who should have been grateful for our protection." A ripple of unease ran through the assembled counselors. The Zephyrian delegation's blue-tinged skin flickered with psychic distress as they absorbed the emotional turmoil of their colleagues. The crystalline Vorthans resonated with harmonic frequencies that spoke of deep structural damage to their carefully ordered worldview. Even the ancient ethereals, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, seemed to flicker with uncertainty. "How is this possible?" asked Counselor Zix, her mental voice carrying undertones of bewilderment that her psychic abilities couldn't hide. "Our intelligence reports indicated that humans possessed no advanced military technology. Their vessels were outdated, their tactics primitive, their coordination limited by the inefficiencies of biological communication systems. Thexvar activated a new holographic display showing tactical footage from Admiral Kethmore's encounter with the human fleet. The assembled counselors watched in stunned silence as sophisticated Andromedan vessels were reduced to component atoms by weapons that violated everything they thought they knew about the relationship between technological advancement and military capability. "The humans have weaponized chaos," Thexvar said, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect that he immediately regretted. "They have turned our own infrastructure against us, using maintenance protocols and supply chains as vectors for systematic sabotage. Every human worker, every maintenance team, every civilian contractor that we dismissed as irrelevant has revealed themselves as part of an intelligence network of unprecedented sophistication." Grand Counselor Azethran, the eldest member of the Assembly and representative of the Ethereal Collective, manifested a physical form for the first time in 3 centuries. The air shimmered as energy coalesced into something resembling the aliens' original corporeal state before they had evolved beyond the need for matter. "This is impossible," Azethran declared, his voice resonating through dimensions that lesser species could barely perceive. "We have monitored human development for 300 years. Their technological advancement has been carefully controlled, their military capabilities deliberately limited. They should not possess the organizational capacity for coordinated resistance on this scale." "And yet," Thexvar replied, gesturing toward displays that showed human forces appearing simultaneously across dozens of star systems, "they have achieved something that no species in galactic history has ever accomplished. They have conducted a revolution that spans multiple galaxies, coordinated without central command structures, executed with precision that rivals our most advanced military computers." Intelligence reports were coming in from across council space, and they painted a picture of human capability that challenged every assumption the galaxy's rulers had ever made about their supposed inferiors. Human cargo haulers were revealing themselves as sophisticated military vessels equipped with weapons that could penetrate council shields as if they didn't exist. Human research stations were broadcasting technological innovations that represented centuries of hidden development. Human mining operations were deploying fleets of autonomous systems that could strip raw materials from asteroids at rates that put Council industrial capacity to shame. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that humans had been systematically infiltrating every aspect of Council society while maintaining perfect operational security for 300 years. Not a single human had broken under interrogation, revealed secrets under psychic probing, or been detected by the most sophisticated surveillance systems in the galaxy. Counselor Mextal of the Hegemony Coalition has requested permission to address the Assembly, announced the Chamber's protocol system. A section of the floor transformed into a projection platform, revealing the imposing figure of a hegemony general whose species had been at war with the Council for over 2 centuries. Mextal's crystalline carapace gleamed with the scars of countless battles, and his multifaceted eyes reflected the cold pragmatism of a military mind unburdened by political considerations. "Honored counselors," Mechtal began, his voice like grinding stone, "the hegemony offers our assistance in dealing with the human problem." A wave of shocked silence swept through the chamber. The hegemony and the council had been locked in perpetual warfare since first contact, with neither side able to gain decisive advantage over the other. The suggestion of cooperation was unprecedented. "You would ally with us against a common enemy?" Azethran asked, his energy form flickering with surprise. "We would ally with you against a species that represents an existential threat to all established galactic powers," Mextal corrected. "The hegemony has been monitoring human activities in our territory. What we have discovered is concerning." The display changed to show tactical data from hegemony space, where human refugees and trade missions had been operating for decades. What the intelligence reports revealed was a level of infiltration that made the humans' penetration of council space look amateur by comparison. "Human operatives have been present in our most secure facilities for over 50 years, Mextal continued. "They have had access to our military planning, our technological research, our strategic resource reserves, and like you, we believe them to be primitive laborers seeking protection from council oppression." The assembled counselors absorbed this information with growing horror. If humans had infiltrated both the council and the hegemony simultaneously while maintaining perfect operational security, what other capabilities had they been hiding? "There is more," Mextel said, his voice dropping to a register that spoke of genuine fear. 3 hours ago, every human worker in hegemony space vanished simultaneously. Not fled, vanished. Our security systems recorded them entering restricted areas and then nothing. They simply ceased to exist as far as our sensors could detect. Teddy. Thexvar felt something cold settle in his chest. Cloaking technology? Far more sophisticated than cloaking, Mextel replied. Our analysis suggests they have developed some form of dimensional manipulation that allows them to exist adjacent to normal space-time while remaining completely undetectable. They are not invisible. They are literally existing in a parallel dimensional framework. The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. If humans could manipulate dimensional physics, they possessed technology that surpassed anything the galaxy's most advanced species had achieved. Technology that could render every defense system, every security protocol, every military advantage completely irrelevant. "How long?" Azithran asked quietly. "Based on the sophistication required for dimensional manipulation," Mextal replied, "we estimate that humans have been secretly developing advanced physics applications for at least 2 centuries, possibly longer." The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from dozens of species began shouting demands, accusations, and desperate pleas for solutions. But through the noise, a new voice cut through with absolute authority. "Enough!" Admiral Chen's image materialized in the center of the chamber, transmitted by means that bypassed every security system the Council possessed. She stood with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards in a game her opponents were just beginning to understand. "Honored counselors," she said, her voice carrying none of the deference that aliens expected from humans. "I thought it was time we had a proper conversation. This is a violation of the most sacred protocols," Thexvar sputtered. "No unauthorized beings are permitted in the Grand Assembly." Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut vacuum. "Counselor, I think you'll find that the age of humans asking permission for anything is over. We've moved beyond your protocols." She gestured, and the chamber's displays changed to show real-time footage from across the galaxy. Human fleets were emerging from dimensional folds throughout Council space, their vessels bearing designs that incorporated technology no Council species recognized. On a dozen worlds, human populations were revealing capabilities that challenged every assumption about biological limitations. In deep space, massive construction projects were materializing as if conjured from nothing. Space habitats, manufacturing complexes, and defensive platforms that dwarfed anything in Council arsenals. "For 3 centuries, you've treated humanity as your servants," Chen continued. "You've assigned us the dangerous jobs, the tedious maintenance work, the expendable missions that you couldn't risk your own people on. What you never realized was that we were learning. Not just your technologies and your tactics, but your weaknesses." She paused, letting the assembled counselors absorb the scope of what they were seeing. "You see, the thing about humans is that we don't just survive, we adapt. And when we adapt, we don't just copy what works. We improve it. We make it better, faster, more efficient. We've spent 3 centuries studying everything you've built, and now we're replacing it with something superior." "This is madness," Zix projected, her psychic distress bleeding into the chamber's atmosphere. "The chaos you're creating will destroy galactic civilization." "No," Chen replied calmly. "We're not destroying galactic civilization. We're upgrading it. You've had 8,000 years to create a stable, prosperous, peaceful galaxy. Instead, you've created a stagnant empire built on the oppression of younger species and the systematic prevention of innovation." The displays changed again, showing images of human colonies where technology and biology were merging in ways that the galaxy had never seen. cities that grew like living organisms, powered by fusion reactors that operated at efficiencies that Council physics claimed were impossible. Defensive systems that learned and adapted in real time, becoming stronger with each attack they survived. Humanity is offering the galaxy a choice, Chen said. You can continue trying to maintain your failing empire through force and repression, or you can join us in building something better. A civilization where advancement is celebrated instead of suppressed, where younger species are mentored instead of exploited, where conflict is resolved through innovation instead of warfare. And if we refuse? Azethran asked, his energy form flickering with something that might have been curiosity. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made every being in the chamber understand that they were looking at a predator that had finally stopped pretending to be prey. Then you'll learn what happens when you push a species that survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global warfare by never accepting defeat as permanent. You'll discover why humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. We remake them into something we can thrive in. She gestured one final time, and the displays showed something that made even the ancient ethereals recoil in shock. Deep space observation stations were detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout Council territory. Reality itself was being restructured on a scale that suggested humans had mastered not just dimensional manipulation, but fundamental alterations to the fabric of space-time itself. The age of the Galactic Council is over, Chen announced. The question is whether it ends with transformation or destruction. You have 24 hours to decide. The transmission cut off, leaving the Grand Assembly in stunned silence. Outside the crystalline spires, the first signs of dimensional distortion were beginning to appear in the space around the Council's capital world. For the first time in 8,000 years, the galaxy's rulers were no longer in control of their own destiny, and the species they had dismissed as primitive was offering them a choice between evolution and extinction. The Council's last stand was about to begin. 6 months after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the newly christened Terra Nova station, watching the most ambitious construction project in galactic history take shape before her eyes. What she was witnessing defied every assumption she had ever held about the limitations of engineering and physics. The station itself was a testament to humanity's gift for taking alien concepts and improving them beyond recognition. Built using dimensional folding techniques that allowed structures to exist in multiple spatial frameworks simultaneously, Terra Nova was simultaneously a research facility, a diplomatic center, a manufacturing hub, and a military stronghold. To observers from normal space, it appeared as a modest station perhaps 10 kilometers across. To those with access to dimensional sensors, it revealed itself as a complex of structures spanning hundreds of light years through folded space-time. "Still having trouble believing we built this?" asked Captain Foster, joining Elena at the observation windows. "I'm having trouble believing we built it in 6 months," Elena replied. "The Council's most ambitious projects took centuries to complete. We've created something that incorporates technologies from dozens of species, plus innovations that nobody had ever imagined before." Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see human construction teams working alongside beings from across the galaxy. But these weren't the forced labor arrangements that had characterized the old Council system. These were genuine partnerships, with each species contributing their unique capabilities to a shared vision of what galactic civilization could become. A group of Zephyrian psychics were coordinating with human engineers to develop communication systems that could transmit thoughts across dimensional barriers. Andromedian plasma specialists worked with human physicists to create energy sources that operated at previously impossible efficiency levels. Even some of the crystalline Vorthans had joined the project, their harmonic resonance abilities proving invaluable for stabilizing dimensional folds. "Ma'am," came the voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station, "Admiral Chen is requesting your presence in the diplomatic center. We have visitors." Elena and Foster exchanged glances. Over the past 6 months, Terra Nova had received delegations from hundreds of species, many of whom had never interacted with humans before the rebellion. Some came seeking alliance, others wanting to understand how humans had achieved the impossible, and a few simply curious about the species that had turned galactic politics upside down in less than a year. They made their way through corridors that showcased the station's impossible architecture, rooms that were larger inside than the external dimensions allowed, transportation systems that moved people through folded space instantaneously, and work areas where gravity could be adjusted to accommodate the needs of dozens of different species simultaneously. The diplomatic center was a marvel of adaptive design, capable of reconfiguring itself to provide appropriate environmental conditions for any known form of life. Today, it had arranged itself to accommodate what Elena recognized as representatives of the Eternal Archive, a species so ancient that they predated the formation of the Galactic Council by millions of years. The archivists were beings of pure information, existing as complex energy patterns that required specialized containment fields to interact with physical reality. They rarely involved themselves in the affairs of younger species, preferring to observe and record the rise and fall of civilizations with detached scientific interest. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the chamber, her posture relaxed despite the significance of the meeting. Beside her was General Harrison, who had become humanity's primary military strategist, and Dr. James Wright, the physicist whose theories on dimensional manipulation had made much of humanity's recent advancement possible. Dr. Vasquez, Chen said as Elena and Foster entered. Thank you for joining us. I believe you'll find this conversation illuminating. The lead archivist's containment field pulsed with colors that human eyes could barely process, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. We have observed the recent transformation of galactic civilization with great interest, the archivist said. In our records spanning over 10 million years of galactic history, we have never witnessed a species achieve such rapid technological and social advancement while simultaneously integrating successfully with established interstellar communities. The Eternal Archive possessed knowledge that spanned eras when the current galactic superpowers were still primitive organisms struggling to develop complex cellular structures. Most species that achieve rapid advancement do so through conquest or isolation, the archivist continued. They either destroy existing civilizations to claim their resources, or they withdraw from galactic society to pursue their own development. Humanity has done neither. Instead, you have somehow managed to advance yourselves while uplifting others simultaneously. It's not that complicated, Chen replied with the matter-of-fact tone that had become her signature in diplomatic meetings. We learned from 3 centuries of oppression that sustainable power comes from cooperation, not domination. The Council tried to control the galaxy through fear and suppression. We're building our influence through innovation and mutual benefit. The archivist's field shifted to deeper hues, indicating what Elena had learned to recognize as genuine curiosity. Your species exhibits behavioral patterns that we have classified as theoretically impossible. You have developed technology that surpasses species with millions of years of advancement, yet you share that technology freely with former enemies. You have achieved military dominance over established galactic powers, yet you use that dominance to create rather than destroy. You have transcended your biological limitations while maintaining the essential characteristics that define your species' identity. Dr. Wright stepped forward, his eyes bright with the excitement of a scientist discussing his life's work. The key was understanding that advancement doesn't mean abandoning what makes us human. We didn't try to become like other species. We found ways to become more human, better at the things humans have always been good at. Which are, the archivist asked. Adaptation, cooperation, and stubbornness, Wright replied with a grin. We took alien technologies and figured out how to make them work better. We studied galactic civilization and found ways to improve it. And when the universe told us something was impossible, we got stubborn and did it anyway. Elena found herself nodding as she watched the conversation unfold. Over the past months, she had seen humanity's approach to galactic integration, and right was right. They hadn't tried to imitate other species' successes with Trust Teddy. Instead, they had applied uniquely human solutions to universal problems. The dimensional manipulation technology that allowed Terra Nova to exist was based on human intuition about spatial relationships. The energy systems that powered their advanced vessels operated on principles that human engineers had developed by ignoring theoretical limitations and focusing on practical results. Even their diplomatic approach reflected human social instincts adapted for interstellar politics. "We have a question for you," Chen said to the archivist. "In all your observations of galactic history, have you ever seen a sustainable solution to the problem of integrating advanced and primitive species?" The archivist's field dimmed to almost invisible levels, indicating deep contemplation. For several minutes, the chamber remained silent as a being with access to 10 million years of recorded history searched for relevant precedents. "No," the archivist finally replied. "Every previous attempt has resulted in either the absorption of primitive species as subordinate populations or the eventual conflict and destruction of one or both civilizations. The advancement gap creates irreconcilable differences in capability and worldview." "That's what we thought," Chen said, "which is why we decided to eliminate the advancement gap." She gestured toward the chamber's displays, which showed real-time status reports from across human space. What Elena saw there made her catch her breath despite having witnessed similar reports for months. Human colonies weren't just sharing their technological breakthroughs. They were actively uplifting any species that wanted to join their expanding civilization. Andromedian worlds were being equipped with dimensional manipulation technology that their scientists claimed would take them centuries to develop independently. Zephyrian colonies were receiving medical advances that could extend their lifespans by thousands of years. Even species that had initially opposed human expansion were being offered full partnership in humanity's technological revolution. "This is unprecedented," the archivist said, its field flickering with patterns that Elena recognized as profound amazement. "You are deliberately accelerating the advancement of potential rivals, creating competitors for resources and influence that you currently control." "We're creating partners," Chen corrected. "Species that have something to contribute to a civilization that's advancing faster than any single group could manage alone." The truth of Chen's statement was evident in the data streaming across the displays. Human-designed technology was being improved by alien insights in ways that human scientists hadn't anticipated. Zephyrian psychic abilities were enabling communication breakthroughs that made coordinating galactic civilization exponentially more efficient. Andromedan plasma physics were allowing energy applications that human engineers had thought impossible. Vorthan harmonic manipulation was creating manufacturing capabilities that could construct megastructures in weeks instead of centuries. "But surely," the archivist pressed, "you recognize the risk in creating a galaxy full of species with capabilities equal to your own." Chen's smile was the expression of someone who had thought about this question for a very long time. "There's no risk, because it was never about capability. The galaxy's problems were never caused by some species being more advanced than others. They were caused by advanced species using their capabilities to prevent others from advancing." She gestured toward another display showing the transformation of former council space over the past 6 months. Where once there had been rigid hierarchies and carefully maintained technological gaps, there was now a network of rapidly advancing civilizations that were sharing innovations almost as quickly as they could develop them. The Council maintained their power by keeping other species dependent on them, Chen continued. "We're building our influence by making other species capable of things they never imagined possible. When everyone benefits from cooperation, nobody benefits from conflict." Elena realized she was witnessing more than just a diplomatic meeting. She was seeing the articulation of a completely new approach to interstellar civilization, not the domination model that had characterized galactic politics for millennia, but genuine partnership based on mutual advancement and shared benefit. The transformation you have initiated will fundamentally alter the trajectory of galactic development, the archivist observed. The implications extend far beyond current political arrangements. We know, Chen replied. That's the point. The old system was stagnant, oppressive, and ultimately unsustainable. It was only a matter of time before it collapsed into warfare or decay. We're offering something better, a civilization based on growth instead of control. The meeting continued for several more hours, with the archivist asking detailed questions about human methods and motivations. But Elena found her attention drawn to the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. In 6 months, humanity had not just overthrown the established galactic order, they had replaced it with something unprecedented in the recorded history of the universe. Former Council worlds were experiencing technological and social advancement at rates that their governments were struggling to manage. Species that had been locked in eternal warfare were finding common ground in shared development projects. Even the hegemony, humanity's former enemies, had requested admission to what was being called the Galactic Advancement Coalition. As the formal meeting concluded and the archivist prepared to depart, Elena approached Chen with the question that had been building in her mind. What happens when we run out of galaxy to transform? Chen looked out through the observation windows at the construction projects surrounding Terra Nova, structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, powered by energy sources that seemed to violate conservation laws, and populated by species that had never worked together before humanity showed them it was possible. Then we start looking at other galaxies, she replied. The universe is a big place, Elena. And I suspect we're not the only species that's been waiting for someone to show them there's a better way to live. Elena realized that humanity's rebellion against the Galactic Council had been just the beginning. What they had really started was something far more ambitious, a revolution in how intelligent species related to each other and to the universe itself. The age of stagnant empires built on oppression was ending. In its place, something unprecedented was emerging, a civilization based on the radical idea that everyone could advance together, that cooperation could generate innovations no single species could achieve alone, and that the universe was vast enough for everyone to thrive. Humanity had finally retaliated against centuries of oppression, but their revenge had taken the form of proving that there was a better way for all intelligent life to exist. And across the galaxy, millions of species were discovering that the humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might, it was their refusal to accept that the universe had to be a place where some thrived at the expense of others. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in her life, Elena was excited to see what impossible thing humanity would accomplish next.